What's going on, guys? Matty Russell here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to build grow beds out of IBCs for your aquaponics system. Let's get stuck into the video. Now, first things first, you're going to need a frame in order to support the weight of the grow beds. I decided to use some old timber which I had laying around. For the main load-bearing supports, I used some cedar posts which I cut at 500 millimeters high. I then built the rails out of some old pine and fixed it all into position using some screws. If you're handy enough, you could weld together a frame out of metal, or I've also seen a lot of people use Besser blocks as a support for the grow beds instead. Whatever you choose to use, make sure it's strong and sturdy because there's going to be a heck of a lot of weight on top of it. Now guys, when it comes to cutting your IBC and converting it into a grow bed, I like to take the plastic tote out of the cage and then cut the cage right here on the second bar down from the top. So I'm going to take the tote out and cut it with the angle grinder. Right, once we've cut the grow bed section of the cage, I've gone ahead and popped them on top of the timber frame. And the next step is to take your plastic tote, turn it upside down, pop it inside the grow bed section of the cage and mark around the perimeter with a Sharpie. That then becomes our cutting line for cutting it with the angle grinder. Once we got them all cut, it's time to give them a clean out with the hose. And just quickly guys, I like to reinstall these bars at the base of the grow bed in order to give it extra support once it's full. Right, so now that we've got the grow beds into position, it's time to go ahead and do the plumbing. And if you've seen my other videos, then you've got a basic understanding of how plumbing works. So rather than take you through the entire process, I'm just going to pop on over, turn the camera around and show you what I've done. Right, from the water outlet from the Radial Flow Settler bulkhead fitting, we attached a 40mm threaded female adapter. From there, we go into a 45-degree angle elbow, into another 45-degree angle elbow facing the opposite way. Then into a 40mm T-section, down into a 40mm to 25mm reducer, into a 25mm ball valve, into a 25mm 90-degree angle elbow. Now the reason I've done this, instead of using a 40mm ball valve and gone with a 25mm ball valve, is because, well, quite frankly, they're a lot cheaper. And if you're wondering why I've installed a tap into this grow bed and not the rest, it's because I want to regulate the flow in here, in as much as we will at a later stage be installing a bell siphon, which I'll do in an upcoming video. Out the other side of the T section, we go a 40mm pipe, down into another 40mm T-section and into a 40mm 90-degree elbow. From there, 40mm pipe again down into another T-section and yet again another 90-degree elbow. Lastly, another section of 40mm pipe into a 90-degree elbow and then another 90-degree elbow, positioning it into the last grow bed. This glass grow bed here will actually be a deep water culture with a floating raft. The remaining two beds in the middle here will be constant flood without a bell siphon. And as I said, this bed here with the tap regulating the flow will be a grow bed with a bell siphon. Now that we've plumbed the water inlet into the grow beds, it's time to plumb in the water outlets, which will eventually drain into the sump. Let me show you how it's done. Now guys, when it comes to plumbing up the water outlet in the grow beds, I'm going with the 25mm bulkhead fitting. a 25mm male threaded adapter, which will go into the top of the bulkhead fitting. And then we're going to use 25mm PVC pipe to act as a standpipe to regulate the water levels in the grow bed. And in keeping consistent with the rest of the build, we've got a 38mm hole saw on the drill in order to cut out the hole for the 25mm bulkhead fitting. That's one grow bed done. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish the plumbing in the rest. But I'm not going to bore you with that. After all, you get the drill. I'm going to go ahead and complete the rest. I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. And here is the plumbing complete. From the water outlet from the Radial Flow Settler down, regulated by a tap into the first grow bed, which will have a bell siphon on it. Continuing down here into a constant flood bed, another constant flood bed, and lastly a deep water culture with the floating raft. All of our standpipes and bulkhead fittings for the water outlets from the grow beds are now installed. All of the plumbing going down under the grow beds into eventually what will be the sump. And there you have it, guys. That's how you build grow beds out of IBC containers for your aquaponics system. In next week's video, we'll be installing the sump, which we'll also make out of an IBC, and we'll also be plumbing up the pump from the sump to the fish tank. Thanks again for joining. Why don't you go ahead, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Guys, if you're joining us for the first time and you haven't seen the rest of the videos in this build, then I'll go ahead and leave a link to a playlist in the description below.